criminal defense and appellate attorney Matthew Barhoma of Barhoma Law, whose practice includes financial fraud. So, Matthew, thanks for joining this show. So Sam Bankman-Fried is now in FBI custody, facing both civil and criminal charges. What's the road ahead for him?
Let me tell you something. And first, thank you for having me on, by the way. But I got to tell you, the fact that there are these plea deals, it signals a lot of issues for SBF, okay? And something you got to keep in mind is that he's been charged with 8 various counts. 5 of them are conspiracy counts, right? You got to have an agreement with someone else to have a conspiracy, right? So that means, obviously, it signals that there are others involved. There's going to be more cooperation. There are going to be exactly these kinds of plea deals. And actually, let me tell you something. We know a lot about the plea deal. I was just reading it before we got on. And it includes the fact that that Elson would be free. She's going to be on bail, $250,000 bail. She's going to be free. She's going to be on her own recognizance. And the plea deal is very explicit. Okay, I thought this was kind of strange. It's very explicit. It says that it doesn't guarantee the fact that she won't get 110 years worth of a sentence, because that's what she's facing currently, right? But they could, the DOJ, the charging agency, could file a motion at the end of all of this asking for more lenient sentencing if she cooperates. It also includes a whole statement in there about her cooperation. She needs to tell us where, how, when, why, all the motives. She needs to provide all the backbone details. So what do I think of SBF's case? It's only growing, okay? Just because he's been extradited, it doesn't mean that it's over. Just because he's been charged doesn't mean, all right, great, said and done. No, if anything, this investigation is only the start.
How can he get out of it?
He's not going to get out of it. I don't see that happening.
If you were a defense attorney for Sam Bankman-Fried, what possible pathway, given you have Caroline, just I assume somebody very
Caroline
close
Ellison
to him,
and Gary Wong.
And we don't know about Sam Trabucco, right? He's not mentioned in anything. Who knows what he was saying? But you have all these people who are willing to talk. How does he get out of this? Does he get out of it at all?
There is no getting out of it completely. But what I do think there is a lot of mitigating. Okay, from a good defense attorney, if he's really equipped, there's a whole lot of mitigation on the table. For instance, the fact that you have these cooperating witnesses, these are pled out. Right, they have skin in the game. They have incentive to advance maybe things that are untruthful, right? To better, more leniency sentencing, and you got to point that out, during any kind of trial for SBF. So if you're defending SBF, that's one core criteria. You got to attack the credibility of a lot of these witnesses that are now going to come up against them. Now the problem
during
is,
Sam Bankman-Fried's apology tour to the media, he seemed to throw Caroline Ellison under the bus. He seemed to put the blame on Alameda Research, saying, I don't know what they were doing. I was unaware of any commingling of funds. I did not run Alameda Research. So it appears there, he was kind of setting up a defense there. Will that be effective at all?
Well, that's one of my biggest problems with him is the fact that this guy can't keep his mouth shut. Right, he's doing these news runs. He was tweeting, he's exchanging, all this conversation, and it was clear. I know exactly what he was doing. He was trying to dispel liability on himself and almost kind of, cornering it and terming it as, none of this was intentional. This was mislabeled. You don't mislabel $10 billion, right? That's the problem. Now, with that being said, it brought me to my next best point, and you hit right on it, which is the fact that he's got to mitigate intentionalness, right? He's got to show day-to-day business judgment. These were people that were employed for this job. They did this task. This was an oversight on my behalf, right? The more of less intentional the conduct is, the closer he's going to get from abating fraud convictions, right? Because fraud is intentional or negligent misrepresentation of material fact. So he's going to have to advance as much negligence and not gross negligence as possible. It's sticky.
So it's really not helpful. It's really not helpful that he had a group on what was it, on Signal called Wire Fraud, or what was it? What was it called, Christine?
It was called
yeah,
Wire
it was like
Fraud, allegedly.
Wire Fraud. That was his actual name. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how this happened.
Do we know anything further about Gary Wang? We have not heard much about him, but he is a co-founder of FTX. During John J. Ray's testimony before Congress, he is the current CEO of FTX. He had mentioned that Gary Wang was involved in hacking FTX, taking away hundreds of millions of dollars for the benefit of the Bahamian government. But do we know anything further about this arrangement Gary Wang has struck with authorities?
You know, I think that it's going to be very similar to what we've already seen with the other co-conspirator. Now, the thing is with Wang that really gets me is the fact that he's actually built this whole back-end, technology that allowed for fraud to occur on consumers, right? Here's the thing. With these guys, there's fraud all over the place. There's fraud to investors. There's fraud to consumers. There's fraud to every layer of it, right? And Wang specifically orchestrated a backdoor, okay? I mean, specifically was a doorman, right, that allowed money to flow between the two companies. He created the software. This is MO evidence, right? Like, how'd you do it? This is how they did it, right? So ultimately, I think with him, he's very culpable. He's extremely engaged. He is, I would say, as close to SBF as it is. I mean, this is someone who co-founded and ultimately also put together the actual software. So to me, the blood on his hands are really bad. And he probably is more desperate for a pre-deal than anyone else at stake. He sits very close to the heart of this. And it's going to be hard for SBF to show that he wasn't involved. And you're right. I mean, he called himself wire fraud, right? And this is how they engaged. They engaged in this knowing scheme where there was a whole software that was developed behind it to be able to orchestrate this. And not only that, there was also external factors. They were trading in the market. They were manipulating the market.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, it'll be very fascinating to watch how this trial continues. Matthew, thank you so much for joining us. That was Matthew Barhoma, criminal defense and appellate attorney at Barhoma Law.